was attended today. And so expect this to come in your email. And the second thing, which we do have a date for, is we have a webinar similar to this in March 17th. And this is going to be at the same time as today. So 1 p.m. Eastern time and 10 a.m. Pacific time. And so our product team, this led by Nick Robin, he's going to talk about how to build voice agents from scratch using our new product called Composer. So this is sort of a vibe coding, a sort of agentic building approach to building voice AI assistants. And this is built right into the VAPI product, the VAPI dashboard, and you can scan that QR code, right, that's showing my screen if you want to attend. So it'll be a similar workshop to this. It'll be hosted on Zoom, March 17th, and we're going to show you how this product works. So you can come in, see how you can quickly build V1 agents. You could possibly take that blueprint and basically vibe code your first version. So it's very important to build, design, use the framework to design and write the requirements for that voice agent. Now, okay, I'm going to do a Q&A. We have maybe about 15 minutes left. And so I would love to just see if there's any questions I could answer. Yeah, just let me know. So feel free to type questions in the chat. And I know Velson might come on and help answer some of those questions. I'll answer as many questions as possible around the framework, identifying use cases, seeing hotspots, what are good use cases to start with, which ones are not, why, maybe we can get a little bit more into also like systems design, a bit about the VAPI product. If I'm not able to answer all the questions, we can also do that following up on the webinar. And we also have a Discord channel there. So, okay, I'm going to just switch here for questions. Felson, do we have anything that I should answer here?
Yeah, we have a pretty popular question about how to provide good guardrails for the agent. I think it'd be great to answer this one live for everyone.
Yeah, so how to provide good guardrails. It all comes down to design, right? So first you want to identify what are the things that you need to guardrail against, right? And it changes by industry, by use case. And so there's two parts. One is you work with your customers to define what are the things that they're most concerned about. For example, for every tool call that you make into a systems of record, you would expect that sometimes they will return the wrong or incorrect information, right? So you can anticipate from the design that this is going to happen. So looking at just all the tool calls that you have to make, that's one opportunity. That's one thing. Second is branding. Customers have a brand that they deeply care about, and they have things that your agent can or cannot say, and so you want to incorporate all of that in the process. You have compliance and security. You also should talk to IT or InfoSec to understand what are other cases that they don't want to address. Now, most of the guardrailing work happens around the prompt engineering and the tool calling part of the voice agent building. And so really it comes down to knowing like a list of the things that the business cares about, and then defining what those are, and then translating those into the prompt for your voice agents, and then also how it's going to respond based on what tool calls it gets around those. And so for guardrails, that's one big aspect in the design. The second big aspect is in the testing. It is not practically possible to basically figure out all the things that you have to guardrail against. So the best way to do this is to come up with a set of tests and evaluations that help you catch additional things that you might have missed, right? So, and there's two kinds of tests that you can do. One is very specific tests, like you know that the agent must never give medical advice, for example. That's a guardrail. So you can write a hard test against that. But sometimes you may not be able to anticipate all of the things that you want to look for. So then what you want to do is to do a bit more of exploratory testing or simulations testing or agent-to-agent testing where basically you spin up an agent to be able to cover way more variability in what could possibly go wrong, and then basically battle test your agent against it, and then see what the results are. And then from the results, you might see new things that you need to guardrail against. So you add those back into the design, which was the first part. So that's how I would handle the guardrailing. It's a bit of an art, to be honest. There's no like, like when you build software, you can write a bunch of unit tests, and then you can deterministically cover like the universe of things that need to be checked against. But in voice agents, which is a non-deterministic system, you have to design heavily for it based on what your customer needs are, and then you have to test heavily for it as well. Yeah. Belton, you still there?
Yep, great. Another question that we have is what are the key pieces of information to ask to your customers to build an agent? For example, FAQs, about us, qualifying questions.
Yeah. So the question is basically what questions to ask your customers to define what they want to do, right? So first, you identify what that use case is. So when you identify the use case or the journey or the hotspot, you kind of like already have some idea or the kind of thing that they're trying to accomplish, right? So I would focus a lot on the information in sort of the agent blueprints. You do want to know, you want to scope it down. You want to scope it down to what is it going to do, what is it not going to do, and you have to ask the customer, can we access your APIs? Like what APIs you have. So for example, if you want to do scheduling, or if you want to do customer support, well, we have to be able to access your scheduling system for scheduling. And then for support, you might want to be able to access the CRM, and you might want to be able to access sort of their ticketing system. So that way, when somebody submits a support request or calls for support, you can identify that customer, pull up information about them, and then be able to actually help them. And so if it is a support use case, absolutely, you do want FAQs. You want basically they might already have a help desk, so you can ingest all of that information as a knowledge base for your agent to pull and retrieve data from to answer questions accurately. And so it varies case by case, but I would say look at that use case, figure out just a narrow set of things that it must do. Think about what it's not going to do at the V1 stage, and then figure out how do you create a great experience for it, right? Like what are the kinds of questions that the customers might ask you for, and then what information you have to be able to supply answers to that question.
And another question that we have really is around how to manage multiple organizations. So say you're building on Vappy to resell to other clients and customers. How should you go about structuring that and organizing it?
Yeah, so I would say that's maybe not so much of a framework or how to identify use case question, but more implementation. So some of the patterns that we've seen work with our customers is basically they will create a separate a separate VAPI org uh, per customer on the other side. So that's one pattern we've seen. So one org per customer. That way, all the billing, all the agents, basically your assistants and your squads and the tools, everything is sort of isolated on a per customer basis. Um, and the I guess the downside of that approach is that you do have to write some extra code to then manage it in your system. So you need to have sort of a table or a lookup table of some sort within your backend to track which org ID with which API key for which customer. So you do have to create a bit of like an internal mapping and reference system to keep track of it. The other approach that we've seen customers do is just to manage everything in one Vappy org. And then they end up using a lot of sort of transient assistance with structure outputs to then be able to capture, to first to manage definitions for agents for different end customers. And then they use structure outputs to be able to capture information after each call has happened and then log those against that particular customer. So this is how I've seen the patterns work. I think something here that we could do, if it's like something that a lot of people are looking for, is to send feedback to our product team internally about that as a possible use case. Because I could imagine a sort of like a sub account management system where we could like build an API to basically with one sort of master VAPI API key be able to using the API to create sub orgs, which with billing, but then still manage everything in one place. Not promising anything. It's just something that we would have to see what the demand is for, scope out, and then kind of like make it part of our really big product roadmap.
Yeah, another big question is about multilingual use cases. So, when to go from using a multilingual agent to a multilingual squad? What are the different options there, and how someone could go about building and QAing a multilingual use case?
Yeah. So VAPI's platform, VAPI's architecture is that of highly composable um, units uh, a feature that can be put together to address different use cases. And so that's a good thing and it's a bad thing. And so the good thing is that yeah, you can do multilingual use cases in 10 different ways. And then maybe the downside of that is that choosing the right way is less opinionated in the VAPI system, at least for now. And so that makes it a little bit harder on the builder, which is, I assume, the audience, to figure out what's like the set of best practices that you can do. So for multilingual use cases, I would say in the US, a lot of multilingual happens to be just English and Spanish. And most of the transcribers and the voices, right? Uh, they're fairly good in addressing these two languages and switching between those two. The LLMs DLMs tend to typically work for most languages, so that's why I'm just mostly focusing on the transcribe and on the voice side. Now we have customers in Europe for which this is a little bit more complicated because in Europe it's not just English and Spanish; it could be many more languages, and even within the same country, there could be multiple languages as well. And it turns out that a lot of the so the like the frontier model work in transcription and voices tend to happen in sort of like the most popular languages. So you will see a difference in sort of like performance and how multilingual works. What we find very helpful for less popular languages than English is basically there's different models that perform well for different languages. And so if the surface area of the languages is small, like 1 to 2 languages, it's usually fine to just have a transcription model and a voice model that can switch between. But if it's more complicated, you're covering 3, 4, 5 languages, and each one has its very unique set of constraints, then it might be more of a better pattern to basically, when the customers call in, for example, to basically get them to qualify in one of the languages. And then you basically use like a multi-agent system to basically swap out the underlying configuration to handle that very nicely. And so that's what I'll recommend. And we could go into way more detail here, but there's just a lot of possible ways. So there's no one way, and the only way to know is to run benchmark and test it for the languages that you're trying to target, and for the combination of languages that you're trying to target. We maybe have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions, um, depending on how long it takes to answer each. Let's
Yeah,
find one more.
another good question would be how to optimize for latency and what are the different ways, like the different levers that you can pull in an agent to help optimize that.
Yeah, latency is a very critical question. I recently called a voice agent for a satellite internet company and found that it to be very slow, and it kind of broke the immersion for me. Um, so there's a few things that affect latency. First layer is VAPI already does a lot of underlying work to get you the best latency possible, right? So aside from that, okay, how we look at the things that you can actually do. Um, so what makes latency? Latency is how fast the model responds, how big your prompt is. Those are the two biggest factors in latency, and the other one is like maybe like distance to servers, but let's just say for now, we're not gonna consider that. So basically, for model is pick the smallest, cheapest model you can that can perform your use case at an acceptable threshold. So, for example, if the use case is, let's say, like a simple triaging use case, then you don't really need a lot of intelligence in the model to be able to handle that, right? But if your use case is maybe trying to sell to a very sophisticated buyer, and you have to do negotiation or convincing, then you might want to have like a slightly smarter model for that use case for the target that you're trying to hit. Let's say you're trying to hit 80%. And so basically, I would always pick the smallest possible model that hits my target for that use case. So that's the first thing. The second thing is a lot of work around prompt engineering and context engineering. It's so important, right? You could you could write a very long prompt that does the same things as a very small prompt, and so you want to experiment with ways to simplify the prompt as much as possible. Uh, One of the key things that adds a lot of prompt tokens is when you make tools calls. If you don't optimize the tool calls, and let's say, for example, that you're doing an appointment scheduling, and you hit your endpoint and you say, okay, get available appointments, and then you return all the available appointments for the whole month. Like, think about how many tokens that's going to be. Think about like that JSON payload that's going to come back with a lot of information that you don't need. That's all coming back to your message history in your agent. So it makes every turn longer and longer and longer. And so there's a lot of ways you can try to optimize the prompt, right? You can make it smaller. You can make sure that when you inject tool results or or context, that you keep it really minimal, yet still getting the performance, right? And again, with all of this, you have to run tests. Like you have to know what you're getting. You have to be able to measure and benchmark whether you're hitting that target that you promised your customer with the smallest, fastest. Now, the last thing I'll say in terms of like latency is multi-agent systems do help a lot with latency because you can take a very long prompt for one agent and then break it down into logical units, logical groups, and then just have those individual sub agents basically hand off to each other. So each one keeps a smaller context, and so you can increase the improve the latency. And then you can also look at better models, better voices or transcribers, something that's close to where your customers are. Yeah, so that I think we're out of time. Yeah. Okay. Belton, unless there's anything like that's like we have to answer, let me know. If not, we can end the webinar here. All right. Okay. I think we're gonna wrap up. All right. Thanks everyone. It's been great. Please, we have another one of these webinars next month. So join us, ask us questions. We're here to help. Here to help you succeed in finding use cases, getting to your pilots, getting to your customers, but also on the product side, how to build your agents, how to make them work, how to get to production. Thank you all very much. Thank you and have a nice day.
Let me just save it, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'd like to see. They're trying to do composers like vibe coding. You understand?
Just a second, let me just out of this.
Recording stop.
This is the company calling for help,
What? The company that what?
It's calling for help.
Yeah. It's the company that's hoping somebody in San Francisco will buy them. You understand?
Yeah.
Or at least give it, they can merge with another company and everybody can get a new job. You understand? They don't know what to do, besides doing those demos of ordering from the dentist, the schedules. I'm ready to put this away. Oh, I wanted to do that garden. Okay. So Jamie sent a note. Bobby?
Yes,
Awkward, you want me to tell you now or wait?
let me finish, please.
Criteria. Then our priority matrix, which helps turn those scores and translates those into P1 through P4 classification.
Can I talk to you or
Just a
just
second, I'm just
finishing up?
almost done. Yes.